Foreign aid in Africa isn't working, and is likely doing more harm than good. The worst part is that Western countries know that it doesn't work, but they continue to provide more and more aid each year. Since the 1960s, over $1.3 trillion has been given to various countries in Africa. It's a huge amount. It would be the equivalent of the top 10 richest people in the world donating everything they had, plus an extra $200 billion. This foreign aid has been in the form of cash, food, medicine, and more. But what's difficult to believe is that despite this massive amount being given, very little has changed. Although life expectancy and populations have both risen dramatically, the living standards have stayed relatively the same, and only a few African countries have seen rapid economic growth. The goal with foreign aid has been to pull countries out of poverty, improve their infrastructure, develop their own markets so they can be self-sufficient enough to no longer need foreign aid. But the state of development in Africa is barely any better than it was when aid first started pouring in. Per capita income for most of Africa is either stagnant or in some cases declining. So why isn't foreign aid working? I know what you're thinking: corruption. And yes, there's definitely been some shocking examples of that in recent years. In 2013, Malawi was found to have misused $30 million. The funds were supposed to be used for fertilizer and seeds for farmers, but instead it was used to purchase luxury vehicles for government officials. In 2019, it came to light that Zimbabwe misused $3 billion in aid. The money was supposed to be used for healthcare and various social programs, but again was used to purchase luxury vehicles for government officials and help fund the military. In 2019, it was reported that Nigeria misused over $2 billion that was meant to purchase military equipment to help fight Boko Haram, but the money was instead used to fund political campaigns. So yes, corruption is a huge part of the problem, but corruption doesn't just plague the recipients. Some would argue that the whole system of foreign aid is corrupt. Let's ask the question, why do Western countries still give billions in aid every year, knowing full well that it will have no long-term impact? You could argue that these funds have been wasted and could have been used to improve their own infrastructure. Well, the answer is very simple. Western countries benefit from this system more than we realize. More than half of all aid comes with conditions. One popular condition is that the recipient countries must use it to buy goods and services from the donor nation. Aid has resulted in new markets where hundreds of thousands of jobs are created in Western countries. A huge portion of foreign aid is in the form of loans, which come with large amounts of interest. It's said that some rich nations receive more in interest payments than they give in aid. So who's really benefiting here? African countries receive roughly $130 billion each year, which sounds like a lot, but according to the UN, there's a transfer of wealth from African countries to rich countries in the amount of $210 billion each year, which comes in the form of trade, debt repayments, interest, capital flight, and multinational company profits. That's a net loss of $80 billion each year. Less than 20 cents on the dollar reaches its intended destination. Even when aid does reach the consumer, it can sometimes come at a cost for local producers. Let's look at local farmers. If a country receives a sudden large amount of local grain, then the local farmers can't compete with the influx of free goods. In Tanzania, a priest reported that farmers in his region simply stopped producing food because of the availability of free food that was donated. Recently in Somalia, the drug donations that came in resulted in pharmacies shutting down as they couldn't compete with the flood of free medical supplies. This ended up destroying their developing health system. There's also the issue of dependency. Author and economist Dambisa Moyo wrote a best-selling book on why foreign aid to Africa should end. She argues that constant donations creates a culture of dependency and fails to hold local governments accountable. The World Bank has even admitted that almost all loans are fully disbursed, even if the policy conditions are not met. As a result, these governments have little incentive to develop their own resources and economy. The outcome is that they become reliant on foreign aid as a vital source of support. The impact of foreign aid in African countries is complicated. There's been very little evidence of long-term change. Even though transparency and accountability measures have been taken, we still continue to see evidence of corruption and mismanagement. This isn't just a problem in Africa. You can find this issue in countries like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Cambodia, and the Philippines, just to name a few. Foreign aid keeps pouring in, and the wealth gap between the West and African countries continue to rise. Thanks for watching, and if you like this, feel free to like and subscribe and let me know what you think in the comments.